And now the time has come to say adieu. You were the one, my guiding light. Now I'm just walking in need. Well, the lights are shining bright tonight, honey, all shook up inside.
The sun was just beginning to rise over the small coastal town of San Isidro, painting the sky with colors that looked too soft to belong to a place filled with such struggle. Homes made of thin wood and rusted tin lined the narrow streets, each one carrying stories of families fighting quietly through their days. In one of those homes lived a young man named Liam Cruz, a boy whose voice carried more dreams than he ever dared to speak. Liam grew up learning what hardship meant before he learned how to spell his own name. His father had been a fisherman who never returned after a storm, leaving behind a silence that changed the family forever. His mother Alona, gentle but exhausted, tried to fill that silence with strength, but there were nights when even strength was not enough. Liam saw every tear she tried to hide, and with each one, something inside him promised to never let her carry the weight alone. Music became his answer to a life that offered him very little. He would sit outside their small home in the evenings, the salty wind brushing against his face as he practiced the same old Elvis songs from a borrowed speaker. There was something in that music, something warm, something familiar, that made him feel like he wasn't alone. And slowly, people in the neighborhood began to notice. The boy had a voice that could soften even the hardest day. Every weekend, Liam stood in the busy market, singing near the fruit stalls where the air smelled of mangoes and dust. Children would pause their games to listen, and tired workers would stop for a moment, letting his voice rest their weary minds. A few coins would drop into his small metal can, never enough to change their lives, but enough to keep hope from fading. He didn't dream of fame. He dreamed of helping his mother, repairing their old roof, buying medicine when she coughed too hard, and making sure his younger sister never felt the same fear he did growing up. His songs weren't performed for applause, they were performed for survival. On those warm Philippine nights, as Liam's voice echoed down the streets, no one knew that this quiet boy with a borrowed guitar would one day step onto a stage thousands of miles away. No one knew he was preparing for a destiny even he could not imagine. The turning point in Liam's life began on a day that felt no different from any other. The market was loud, the air was warm, and people moved through their routines with the same tired rhythm. Liam stood in his usual corner, his old guitar pressed against his chest, singing an Elvis classic the way he always did, soft at first, then full and rising, like a quiet sunrise gathering strength. Among the small crowd listening that day was a tourist from California. He wasn't looking for anything extraordinary, he was simply passing through, taking videos of everyday life in the Philippines. But when he heard Liam, he stopped walking. Something in the boy's voice, raw, sincere, filled with the weight of years he hadn't lived, pulled him closer. Without thinking, he recorded the performance, capturing the dusty light, the moving crowd, and the young Filipino who sang with the soul of an old legend. The video, posted online that night, didn't explode instantly. It grew slowly, passed from one person to another, shared in comments filled with surprise and admiration. Filipino communities abroad embraced it first, proud to see a piece of home shining so brightly. Then strangers from faraway places discovered it, touched by a voice that felt honest in a world full of noise. One morning, as Liam swept the small space outside his home, his mother walked toward him holding an old phone in her trembling hands. A message had arrived, an email they almost deleted, thinking it was a mistake. It came from America's Got Talent, inviting Liam to audition in the United States. The family sat together, staring at the screen, unsure if dreams like this were meant for people like them. Traveling felt impossible. Money was scarce. Even hope felt too fragile to hold. But neighbors collected donations, a local musician lent him a better guitar, and a distant relative offered him a place to stay in Los Angeles. With every act of kindness, the impossible felt a little more real. Liam packed lightly, just a few clothes, his guitar, and a small photograph of his father, Los Angeles felt like another world the moment Liam arrived. The lights were too bright, the streets too wide, and the faces too unfamiliar. Everything moved fast, as if the city had no time to breathe. Liam, carrying his guitar close to his chest, walked carefully through the AGT venue like a small boat navigating a storm. Every sound felt louder. Every heartbeat felt heavier. Backstage, contestants paced nervously, adjusting costumes, rehearsing dances, whispering final prayers. Liam stood quietly in a corner, trying to steady his breath. He was far from home, far from the places where people knew his name, far from the soft warmth of his mother's voice. Here, he was just another hopeful among many, a young Filipino boy with nothing but a dream that seemed too fragile for such a big stage. Yet something inside him refused to shrink. Maybe it was the memory of his father's rough hands guiding his tiny fingers over guitar strings. Maybe it was the sound of his mother humming in the kitchen on nights she tried to hide her fears. Or maybe it was the endless evenings singing in the market, where his voice was born not from ambition, but from survival. When his turn finally came, a quiet stillness settled around him. Walking out into the massive arena, Liam felt the weight of every step. The stage lights washed over him, almost blinding, revealing the thousands of faces watching. The judges sat before him like distant figures from a dream. For a moment, he wanted to disappear. But then he remembered why he came. He lifted his guitar gently, as if it were an extension of his own heart. And with the first note, something shifted. The trembling in his hands faded. The noise in his mind quieted. A warmth spread through his chest, the same warmth he felt singing under the Filipino night sky. His voice rose, deep, soulful, carrying the essence of a young man who had lived through storms and found peace in melody. The arena, once buzzing with energy, fell into a deep silence. His performance wasn't loud or grand, it was honest. Pure. A voice shaped by hardship, yet filled with tenderness. In that silence, everyone felt it, the arrival of a rare kind of magic. When the final note drifted into the air like a prayer, the moment hung still, as if the world itself had forgotten to breathe. Long after Liam stepped off the stage, the echo of his voice still lingered in the vast arena. People whispered about him in the hallways, their faces lit with the kind of wonder usually reserved for rare moments. But what touched them even more was not the sound of his singing, it was the story waiting behind it. Backstage, producers invited Liam to share his journey. He sat quietly, hands resting on his guitar, his thoughts drifting to the memories he carried from home. There was nothing glamorous about the life he described. No studios, no teachers, no opportunities. Just a small wooden house by the sea, where the nights were humid and the days were long. A house filled with love, struggle, and a music player that had survived storms just like his family. As cameras rolled, he spoke about growing up without a father, watching his mother sacrifice everything to keep their small family afloat. He recalled the evenings he sang in the market, not for fame, but to buy rice and medicine. Each word painted a picture of a young man shaped by hardship, yet softened by kindness. His story wasn't tragic, it was human. Honest. A mirror of the quiet battles countless families around the world faced every day. When the segment aired, millions of people watching AGT from their living rooms felt an unexpected connection. They saw a boy who wasn't chasing dreams for himself, but for the people he loved. They saw humility in his smile, courage in his journey, and something timeless in his voice. Social media lit up with messages from strangers who felt touched by his sincerity. Many said his story reminded them of their own childhoods, their own struggles, their own parents who had sacrificed everything. Fans began calling him the Filipino Elvis with the golden soul, not just for how he sounded, but for the warmth behind every note he sang. Liam's performance quickly spread beyond the show. Clips of him singing were shared across continents, played in classrooms, cafes, and family gatherings. He became more than a contestant, he became a symbol of hope, proof that talent was not limited by wealth or place of birth. And while the world celebrated him, Liam stayed grounded. He knew the attention was a blessing, but in his heart, he remained the same boy who once sang on crowded streets, hoping to make life a little easier for the people he loved. The night of the semi-finals arrived with a kind of electricity that Liam had never felt before. The arena was filled with thousands of people, but it was the quiet moments backstage that made his heartbeat strongest. He held his guitar gently, running his fingers over its worn edges. Every scratch carried a memory from home, market nights, crowded streets, warm sunsets, and the faces of people who believed in him long before the world knew his name. He had chosen a slower Elvis ballad for the performance, a song tied to his mother. She was the anchor of his life, the quiet strength behind every step he took. As he walked toward the stage, he pictured her sitting on their small sofa back home, eyes glued to the TV, hoping her son felt her love even from across an ocean. The lights dimmed. A hush fell over the arena. And then, with a deep breath, Liam began. His voice floated gently at first, soft and trembling with emotion. It wasn't the confident sound of a superstar, it was the voice of a son singing for the woman who held his world together. Every note felt like a piece of his heart laid bare under the glow of the stage. As the song unfolded, the arena grew impossibly still, as if the entire world leaned in to listen. The judges sat frozen, their expressions softened by something deeper than admiration. The audience stared, many wiping tears without understanding why. It wasn't just the song, it was the sincerity, the truth, the quiet strength in his voice. Liam didn't sing to impress, he sang to feel. To remember. To honor. When he reached the final note, the last emotion-filled vibration drifted into the silence like a farewell carried by the wind. And then the arena erupted. The standing ovation rose like a wave, powerful, overwhelming, unstoppable. People cheered not only because he sang beautifully, but because he reminded them of the people they loved, the struggles they quietly endured, and the resilience that lived inside every ordinary human being. Clips of his performance spread around the world within hours. Millions watched, shared, and cried. Liam's name trended across continents, and messages flooded in from every corner, messages of pride, gratitude, and recognition. Whether he won the AGT trophy didn't matter anymore. He had achieved something much greater. He had touched hearts, lifted spirits, and brought hope to people who needed it. On that night, the boy who once sang in Filipino streets didn't just perform. He became a global voice of courage, love, and possibility.